You talk about secrets, and usually people think about whisper campaigns or hidden text messages. But in my line of work, I've found that secrets have a physical weight to them. They have mass. They take up space in a room. They suck the oxygen right out of a marriage, and eventually they become too heavy to carry. When someone walks onto my stage carrying a secret that's worth 6 figures of missing family money, you can see it in their shoulders before they even sit down. They aren't just hiding a transaction, they are hiding a part of themselves that they are terrified to show the world. And today I was looking at a woman named Sarah who was practically buckling under that weight. When my team first briefed me on this case, the headline was simple, brutal, and all too common. My wife stole our life savings. But you have to look past the headlines if you want to get to the truth. The husband, Mark, was a man on fire. He was a high-voltage wire of anger and betrayal, vibrating with the kind of rage that comes when the person you trust the most in this world pulls the rug out from under you. He told my producers that $185,000 was gone, vanished. This wasn't pocket change. This was their retirement, their daughter's college fund, the safety net they had spent 20 years weaving together. And according to Mark, Sarah had taken a pair of scissors to that net and shredded it while he was sleeping. I walked into the green room before the show just to get a read on the temperature. Mark was pacing, his face flushed a deep, unhealthy red. He was holding a stack of bank statements like they were evidence in a murder trial, shaking them at anyone who would listen. He looked at me and said, "Dr. Phil, she won't even tell me where it is. She just sits there." I ask her if she bought jewelry, if she's gambling, if she's on drugs, and she just stares at the floor. I don't even know who I'm married to anymore. Then I looked at Sarah. She was sitting in the corner as far away from Mark as the small room would allow. She wasn't crying. Crying implies an active release of emotion. Sarah was past that. She was in a state of total shutdown. She was gray, almost translucent, wrapping her cardigan around herself like armor. When our eyes met, I didn't see a criminal mastermind. I didn't see a malicious thief plotting to ruin her husband. I saw a woman who was waiting for the executioner. I saw terror. And that told me that whatever happened to that money, the story Mark had in his head that his wife was just selfish and reckless was wrong. There was a secret here, something rooted deep in shame, and until we excavated that, we weren't going to find a dime of that money. We got out on stage, and the audience could feel the tension immediately. It was palpable. Mark started off, and he didn't hold back. He laid out the timeline with the precision of a forensic accountant. He talked about the day he went to transfer funds for a down payment on a vacation cabin they had talked about for years. He logged in, expecting to see a healthy balance, and saw 3 digits, not 6, 3. He described the panic, the phone calls to the bank thinking it was identity theft, the slow, sickening realization that the transfers were internal, they were authorized, they were Sarah. I let Mark vent. It's important to let that pressure valve release, or he wouldn't be able to listen to a word I said later. He talked about the betrayal of trust, how financial infidelity is sometimes harder to get over than sexual infidelity because it involves the very survival of the family unit. I worked double shifts, he told me, pointing a finger at Sarah. I missed birthdays. I missed anniversaries working overtime to build that account, and she just torched it. I turned my chair toward Sarah. She was staring at her hands, twisting a plain gold band on her finger. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice low, dropping the volume to bring the room in with me, "Mark is saying some very hard things. He's calling you a thief. He's saying you destroyed this family's future. I need you to look at me." She slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were rimmed with red, exhausted. I didn't steal it to hurt him, she whispered. Her voice was brittle, like dry leaves. I don't believe you wake up in the morning plotting to hurt your husband, I said, but the reality is the money is gone. Mark says he doesn't know where it went. He thinks you have a secret account or you're living a double life. Now, I've been doing this a long time, and I know that human behavior has a payoff. You don't do something for nothing. You don't drain $185,000 without a reason. So help me understand, what was the payoff? This is the moment where the walls usually stay up or come crashing down. Sarah looked at Mark, then back at me. I could see the internal calculus running in her brain, the fear of the truth versus the pain of the current situation. I can't, she said. You can't what? I asked. You can't tell us, or you won't tell us. I can't fix it, she said, her voice cracking. It's too late. We aren't talking about fixing it yet, I told her firmly. We are talking about acknowledging it. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. Right now, your husband is filling in the blanks with his worst nightmares. He thinks you don't love him. He thinks you don't care about your daughter's future. If that's not true, you have to give him something else to hold on to. You have to give him the truth. I watched her body language. She was physically shrinking, curling inward. This wasn't just guilt. This was trauma. This was a woman who had been living in a burning building for a long time, breathing in smoke, hoping no one would notice the flames. Let's back up, I said, shifting gears. I needed to understand the dynamic before the theft, before the money disappeared. What was the marriage like? Mark, you said you worked a lot. Was Sarah managing the finances alone? She did the books, Mark said, crossing his arms. She's an accountant. Dr. Phil. That's the worst part. She knows numbers. She handled the bills, the investments, everything. I trusted her completely because this is her profession. I just brought the paycheck home and she allocated it. We had a system, or I thought we did. So we had a dynamic where the wife carried the entire mental load of the financial planning. That's a heavy burden, even for a professional. It creates a space where secrets can fester in the darkness of a spreadsheet that only one person ever sees. Sarah, I ask, when did the first dollar go missing? I'm not talking about the end when the dam broke. I'm talking about the first leak. When did you first move money that you didn't tell Mark about? She closed her eyes. 3 years ago. 3 years, I repeated. That's a long time to carry a lie. That's 1,000 days of waking up next to a man and hoping he doesn't check the balance. That's 1,000 days of holding your breath. That does something to a person's psychology. It erodes your self-worth. It makes you feel like an imposter in your own life. I could see that landed with her. She nodded, just slightly. It started small, she said softly, just trying to fix a mistake. What mistake? Mark interrupted, aggressive. What mistake costs $185,000? I put a hand up to stop him. Mark, let her speak. We are getting somewhere. I turned back to Sarah. You made a mistake 3 years ago. And instead of telling Mark, you tried to fix it yourself with the family money. Is that right? I thought I could put it back, she said, the tears finally starting to spill. I always thought, if I can just fix this one thing, I can put the money back before he notices, and no one has to get hurt. No one has to know I'm stupid. No one has to know I failed. So it wasn't malice, I said, analyzing the pattern. It was fear. You were afraid of his reaction? I was afraid of disappointing him, she said. He works so hard. He's perfect. He never makes mistakes. And you aren't perfect? I finished for her. I'm a mess, she choked out. This was the opening. We had moved from thief to frightened wife trying to cover a mistake, but the math still didn't add up. You don't lose nearly 200 grand covering a small error. There was an escalation here, a spiral that she had lost control of. Sarah, I said, leaning in. A mistake is a parking ticket. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill and getting a late fee. $185,000 is not a mistake. That is a catastrophe. To get from a small error to a catastrophe, something else has to happen. You have to be feeding a beast. What was the beast? The audience was dead silent. Mark was staring at her, his anger momentarily paused by confusion. He didn't know this part of the story. I need you to be brave, Sarah, I said. You are already at the bottom of the well. The only way out is to climb up, and the ladder is the truth. What happened 3 years ago? She took a deep, shuddering breath. She looked at the camera, then at Mark, then at me. I didn't spend it, she said. I didn't buy clothes. I didn't gamble it away at a casino. Then where is it? Mark demanded. I gave it away, she said. You gave it away? Mark's voice went up an octave. To who? She looked at me with eyes full of absolute despair. I gave it to someone because they said they would tell him. She pointed a trembling finger at her husband. Tell him what? I asked. This was it. The core infection, the secret, she whispered. The secret I've never told anyone, not even my therapist, not even God, really. The room went so quiet you could hear the hum of the studio lights. When a guest drops a bomb like that they gave away a fortune to keep a secret, the air changes. Mark had stopped pacing. He was frozen, looking at his wife like she was a stranger he had just met on a bus. His face wasn't red anymore. It had drained to a pale, sickly white. Who? Mark asked. It was barely a whisper. Sarah was trembling so hard her microphone was picking up the rustle of her cardigan. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, locking eyes with her. I needed to act as a shield between her and Mark's impending explosion, but I also needed to be the scalpel that cut this infection out. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice steady and anchored, you said you gave the money to someone to keep them from telling Mark. That implies blackmail. That implies leverage. Who holds that leverage over you? She took a breath that hitched in her chest. A man, she said. His name is, or he said his name was David. Mark let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. A man? You gave our life savings to another man? It's not what you think, she pleaded, turning to him, her hands reaching out but stopping short of touching him. I didn't meet him. I never touched him. It was just we talked on Facebook. It was 3 years ago, Mark. You were working the night shifts at the plant. You were gone 6 nights a week. I was lonely. I sat in that big house by myself night after night, and I just wanted someone to ask me how my day was. I held up a hand to pause Mark, who was vibrating with rage. Hold on, Mark. Let's get the anatomy of this disaster clear so we know what we're dealing with. Sarah, you engaged in an online relationship, an emotional affair. I didn't think of it like that, she said, looking down at her shoes. He was just a friend. He listened. He made me feel seen. I felt invisible in my own marriage, Doctor. Phil, I felt like a housekeeper who paid the bills. So you went looking for a payoff, I told her. We all do things for a payoff. You wanted validation. You wanted connection. And David provided that. But David wasn't real, was he? No, she whispered. After about 3 months, we had exchanged messages, personal messages, photos, compromising photos. I asked. She nodded, tears streaming down her face now. I was stupid. I was drinking wine one night, feeling reckless, feeling like I wanted to be desired. I sent them, and the next morning, the tone changed. He didn't say good morning, beautiful anymore. He sent me a screenshot of my friends list. He had Mark's profile. He had my boss's profile. He said if I didn't send him $5,000, he would send the photos to everyone. The audience gasped. This is a story I've heard 1,000 times, but every time it destroys a life, it feels tragic and new. It's the sextortion script played out on a lonely housewife who made one bad click. So the first $5,000, I said piecing the timeline together. That was the mistake you mentioned earlier. That was the parking ticket. You paid it to make the problem go away. I thought that would be it, Sarah said. I transferred it from our emergency fund. I told myself I'd put it back with my Christmas bonus. I thought I bought his silence. But you don't buy silence from a blackmailer, I said, turning to the audience for a moment before looking back at her. You only rent it, and the rent goes up. He came back a week later, Sarah continued. He said he needed $10,000 or the deal was off. He said he had a sick child. He spun this story. And part of me knew he was lying, but part of me was just so terrified of Mark seeing those pictures. Mark is so moral. He sees the world in black and white. I knew if he saw what I did, he would leave me. He wouldn't even hesitate. I looked at Mark. He was staring at the floor, shaking his head. So you decided to bankrupt us instead? You decided that your reputation was worth my retirement? I was trying to save us, Sarah insisted, her voice rising in desperation. I thought if I could just pay him off, he would disappear and we could go back to being happy. But then he wanted more, and then I panicked. I tried to make the money back. I took $50,000 and put it into a crypto investment that I saw online, hoping I could double it and put everything back before you noticed. I thought I could fix it. And let me guess, I said. The investment was a scam too. It was gone in a week, she sobbed. And then David came back asking for more. And I was in so deep, I felt like I was drowning. Every time I looked at you, Mark, I wanted to vomit. I couldn't sleep. I lost 20 pounds. I was living in a nightmare. This is what we call the escalation phase, I explained, leaning back in my chair. It's the snowball effect. You start with a snowball of guilt. The photos, you try to hide it, so you create a snowball of financial deception. That snowball rolls down the hill, picks up the bad investment, picks up the lies, picks up the second mortgage you secretly took out. And suddenly, you're standing at the bottom of the mountain, looking at an avalanche that has buried your entire life. I turned my attention fully to Mark. He was the victim here, absolutely. He had been betrayed on multiple levels, emotional infidelity and financial devastation. But I also needed to check his role in the dynamic, not to blame him for her theft, but to understand why Sarah felt she couldn't come to him when the demand was just $5,000. Mark, I said, I want to ask you a hard question. Sarah said she was terrified to tell you. She said, you see the world in black and white. If she had come to you 3 years ago, day one, and said, Mark, I messed up. I was lonely. I sent a photo to a guy, and now he's threatening me for $5,000. What would you have done? Mark looked up, his jaw tight. I would have been furious. I would have asked why she was talking to another man. Would you have divorced her? He hesitated. The silence hung heavy in the air. I don't know, he admitted finally. Maybe. I have zero tolerance for cheating. And that, I said, pointing a finger at the space between them, is the currency the blackmailer used. He didn't just use the photos. He used your marriage dynamic against you. Sarah, you predicted Mark's reaction that he would reject you, abandon you, and that fear was stronger than your logic. You were willing to pay $185,000 to avoid that rejection. You were paying to keep your husband. Literally, I love him. Sarah wept. I know it doesn't look like it. I know I'm a monster, but I did it because I couldn't bear to lose him. That is a distorted form of love. I corrected her gently but firmly. That is dependency wrapped in fear. You weren't protecting Mark, you were protecting yourself from the consequences of your actions. And in doing so, you made the consequences 100 times worse. You robbed him of his agency. You made the decision for him that his money was less important than his knowledge of the truth. Mark stood up suddenly. He looked like he was going to be sick. I can't listen to this. I did it for love garbage, he snapped. You stole from my mother's inheritance. Sarah, that money in the savings, part of that was from when my mom passed. You took my mom's legacy and gave it to some scammer on the internet because you needed an ego boost? I'm sorry, she wailed, burying her face in her hands. Sorry doesn't put the money back, Mark yelled. This was the breaking point. The escalation had peaked. We had the truth on the table, the who, the why, and the how much. But the raw emotion in the room was acidic. Mark was disgusted, Sarah was destroyed, and the money was gone. Sit down, Mark, I said, using my command voice. It wasn't a request. We aren't done. Walking away right now feels good, it feels righteous, but it doesn't solve the problem. You are broke, you are betrayed, and you are married to the woman who did it. You need to sit down so we can figure out if there is anything left to salvage here or if we are just doing an autopsy on a dead marriage. He glared at me, then at her, and slowly sank back into his chair. He turned his body away from her, crossing his legs, building a physical wall. Sarah, I said, you have been living in a delusion. You told yourself you could fix it. That is the optimism bias of the addict and the desperate. You thought, one more payment, one more lucky break, and I'll be clean. But you were never going to be clean. Now the dirty laundry's out, the whole world knows, Mark knows. The blackmailer has no power over you anymore because the secret is out. Do you understand that? The leverage is gone. She looked up, eyes swollen. I guess, no, not you guess, you know. The monster under the bed is real and he's sitting right there. I gestured to Mark. The fear you ran from for 3 years is happening right now. You are in the worst case scenario and you are still standing. You are still breathing. So now we have to pivot. We have to stop talking about the past and look at the wreckage. I picked up the stack of papers Mark had brought the bank statements. I've looked at these numbers, I said, and I see something else here that you haven't mentioned. You didn't just drain the savings. You opened 3 credit cards in Mark's name. Is that correct? Mark's head snapped around. What? Sarah flinched. I had to, for the minimum payments on the other loans. So it's not just $185,000 in cash gone, I said, stripping away the last layer of the bandage. It is $40,000 in new debt. You are net negative over $250,000. Mark looked like he had been punched in the gut. The wind went out of him. The anger was replaced by a hollow shock. This is financial homicide, I said. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Sarah, you have killed the financial trust in this relationship. Dead, buried, and you did it while looking him in the eye every night at dinner. That requires a level of compartmentalization that is frankly scary. To be able to slice carrots and ask about his day while you know you just wired 10 grand to a criminal that takes a toll on your soul. It creates a split personality. There is wife Sarah and there is secret Sarah. And secret Sarah has been driving the bus. I hated myself every minute of it, she said. I wanted to get caught. Sometimes I left the browser open hoping he'd see it. That's passive, I said. That's you wanting someone else to stop you because you didn't have the brakes to stop yourself. Well, you're stopped now. You hit the wall. Mark, I need to know where your head is at. You're hearing all this, the emotional affair, the blackmail, the credit cards. Is this a deal breaker? Are you done? Mark looked at his wife. For the first time, he didn't look angry. He looked devastated. I don't know who she is, he said. I've been married to her for 20 years. I thought I knew everything about her. But this woman, the woman who could lie to my face for 3 years, I don't know her. How do I stay married to a stranger? You don't, I said. You can't stay married to the stranger. You either divorce the stranger or you get to know the person underneath the lies, but the Sarah you thought you had, the perfect accountant who handled everything, she doesn't exist. She never did. That was a role she was playing. This, I pointed to the broken woman in the cardigan, is the reality. She's flawed, she's insecure, she's vulnerable, and she's capable of terrible judgment under pressure. The question is, can you live with the reality or do you need the fantasy? The studio was heavy with the weight of that question. Can you live with the reality? It's the question every marriage eventually faces. Usually in smaller doses, when you realize your spouse snores or isn't ambitious or has a temper. But Mark was drinking from a fire hose of reality. He was looking at a woman who had systematically dismantled their life brick by brick out of fear and shame. I need a break, Mark said, his voice cracking. I can't look at her right now. That's fair, I said. We're going to take a breath. We paused taping. I stepped off the platform and walked over to Mark. Away from the cameras, the dynamic shifts. The performance aspect drops away, and you just see the raw pain. She ruined me, Phil, Mark whispered, rubbing his face with shaking hands. I'm 52 years old. I can't restart. I don't have 20 years to build that back. I know, I said, keeping my voice low. The money is a tragedy. I'm not going to minimize that. You have every right to grieve that loss. It's a death. But right now, you have a bleeding wound. We have to stop the bleeding before we worry about the scars. If you leave right now, you leave with the anger. If you stay and work through this, even if you divorce later, you leave with clarity. Don't make a permanent decision on temporary emotion. He nodded, taking a sip of water. I walked over to Sarah. She was being attended to by a producer clutching a tissue like a lifeline. Sarah, I said, you've vomited up the poison. That's the first step. But now comes the hard part. You have to stop being the victim of this story. You are not a passenger. You drove the car off the cliff. I need you to own that. Not with tears, not with I'm sorries, but with action. Are you ready to do that? She looked up, her eyes red and puffy. I don't know how. I don't have any money to give him back. It's not about the money right now, I told her. It's about dignity. It's about showing him you are willing to crawl over broken glass to make this right, even if it takes the rest of your life. Stop hiding. The hiding is what killed you. We went back to our chairs. The lights came up. The audience settled. It was time for the confrontation. This is where we stop recounting the history and start dealing with the character flaws that created it. Welcome back, I said to the camera. We are talking to Mark and Sarah. $185,000 gone. An emotional affair. Blackmail. Lies. It's a perfect storm of marital destruction. But here is the hard truth. I need both of you to hear. The money didn't disappear because of a scammer. The money disappeared because of a broken communication system in this marriage. Mark bristled. How is this my communication problem? I didn't lie. No, you didn't. I agreed. But Mark, you created an environment where Sarah felt that perfection was the price of admission. You said it yourself earlier. I trusted her because she's a professional. I work double shifts. You set a standard, and Sarah, instead of saying, I'm lonely, or I'm overwhelmed, or I made a mistake, went outside the marriage to find comfort because she didn't think she could find it with you. That doesn't excuse her crime, but it explains the motive. I turned to Sarah. You have a pleaser personality. You want everyone to be happy. You want Mark to think you're perfect. You want the online guy to think you're desirable. You are addicted to approval, and when you couldn't get approval, you bought it. You paid the blackmailer to keep Mark's approval. You paid the investment scammers to try and win back your self-approval. You are trying to buy self-worth, and it's the most expensive thing in the world because you can never buy enough of it. Sarah was nodding slowly. I just didn't want to be a disappointment. Well, you are, I said bluntly, you are a disappointment right now. You disappointed your husband, you disappointed yourself. So let's sit in that. The world didn't end. The roof didn't cave in. You are a disappointment. Now what? Does that mean you are worthless? Does that mean you are unlovable? Or does it just mean you are human and you screwed up royally? I feel worthless, she whispered. That's your ego talking, I said. That's your pity party. Oh, poor me, I'm so bad. That's useless to Mark. Mark doesn't need your self-loathing. He needs your accountability. Accountability looks like this. I did this, I own it, I am going to get a second job, I am going to sell my car, I am going to sign over power of attorney to you so you can see every penny I touch for the next 10 years. That is accountability. Crying is not accountability. I looked at Mark. Mark, she has stripped you of your financial security, but you have a choice. You can let this bitterness eat you alive. You can become the angry victim for the rest of your life. You can tell this story at bars to anyone who will listen about the ex-wife who stole your retirement, and you will be right, but you will also be miserable. Or you can decide that money is a renewable resource, but time is not. It's not renewable at 52, Dr. Phil, Mark argued. I can't make that back. You might not make all of it back, I conceded, but you can make some of it back. And you can build a life that isn't defined by this loss. If you stay with Sarah, the marriage changes today. It goes from a partnership to a conservatorship for a while. She loses her financial rights. She has to earn her way back to the table. Are you interested in that, or are you done? Mark looked at Sarah. She wasn't crying anymore. She was looking at him with a kind of terrified hope. I love her, Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. God help me, I still love her. But I don't trust her. I don't trust her at all. Trust is earned, I said. Trust is lost in buckets and earned in drops. You don't have to trust her today. You just have to decide if you want to give her the chance to start filling the bucket again. I turned to Sarah. This is your outcome moment. You have two paths. Path A, you fold. You let the shame win. You divorce. You declare bankruptcy, and you spend the rest of your life hiding from this story. You stand up. You get a job, any job, 2 jobs. You start paying restitution to your own family. You go to therapy to deal with this desperate need for approval. You become an open book. No more passwords on your phone. No more hidden accounts. Total transparency. Which path do you want? I want path B, Sarah said firmly. I want to fix it. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll work at McDonald's. I'll sell my jewelry. I don't care. I just want my husband back. You don't get him back today, I reminded her. You get a chance to win him back. That's all. And Mark, you need to set the terms. If she deviates 1 inch, if she hides a receipt for a pack of gum, the deal is off. Can you be that hard on her? I have to be, Mark said. I can't survive this again. Good, I said. Now I've got resources for you. I'm going to set you up with a forensic accountant to go through the wreckage and see if any of those investments can be recovered. Sometimes these scammers leave a trail. We might get cents on the dollar, but it's something. And Sarah, I'm sending you to individual therapy. You need to figure out why a stranger's attention on Facebook was worth your family's future. Until you solve that hole in your soul, no amount of money is safe with you. The tension in the room had shifted from explosive to resolve. It wasn't a happy ending. There were no hugs. Mark didn't reach for her hand. But the bleeding had stopped. They had a treatment plan. This is going to be a long road, I told them in closing. There will be days, Mark, when you look at her and you just see the money. There will be days, Sarah, when you feel like a prisoner in your own home because you have to ask permission to buy milk. That is the price of the ticket you bought. You bought that ticket when you clicked send on those photos. Now you have to take the ride. But if you do the work, if you actually do the hard, gritty work of rebuilding, you might find that the marriage you build on the other side is stronger than the one you had before. Because the one you had before was built on a foundation of don't ask, don't tell. The new one will be built on the truth. And the truth, no matter how ugly, is the only thing that can support the weight of a life together. I looked at the camera to sign off. Folks, secrets grow in the dark. If you have something you are hiding from your partner, financial, emotional, past mistakes, tell them tonight. It will be scary. It might cause a fight, but it won't cause this. It won't cause a total systemic failure of your life. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Open the curtains. Let the light in. We cut the feed. I stood up and shook Mark's hand. He gripped it hard. He was a broken man, but he was still standing. Sarah stood up, looking smaller than ever, but her eyes were dry. She had a lot of work to do, and frankly, the odds were against them. Financial infidelity has a higher divorce rate than sexual infidelity. But as they walked off the stage, they walked off together with a gap between them, but moving in the same direction. That's the job. You don't save everyone. You just give them the map and a flashlight and hope they find their way out of the woods. After the cameras stopped rolling, the real work began. Television is a sprint. Recovery is a marathon. I watched Mark and Sarah navigate the backstage corridors. They walked like two people sharing a lifeboat after a shipwreck, exhausted, weary, bound by disaster, but not necessarily by affection anymore. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, replaced by the grim reality of the numbers. I asked my producers to bring them to my private office. Sometimes the studio lights provide too much heat and not enough warmth. I wanted to see them when the performance anxiety was gone. Mark was slumped on the leather sofa, staring at a print on the wall without really seeing it. Sarah sat on the edge of a chair, her purse clutched in her lap like it contained the last of her dignity. "How are you feeling?" I asked. Sitting opposite them, discarding the TV doctor persona for something quieter. "Numb," Mark said. "I feel like I'm waking up from surgery and the anesthesia hasn't worn off, but I know it's going to hurt like hell in an hour." "It will," I confirmed. "The anger's going to come back in waves. You're going to be driving to work and you'll remember a vacation you didn't take because money was tight, and you'll realize the money wasn't tight, it was stolen." That rage is valid. but you can't use it as a weapon against her if you've agreed to try to reconcile. You can't beat a dog for peeing on the rug 3 years ago. You have to deal with the mess on the floor today. Sarah looked up. I don't blame him if he hates me. He doesn't hate you, Sarah, I said. If he hated you, he'd be at a lawyer's office right now, not sitting in mine. He's grieving. He's grieving the woman he thought you were. You need to let him mourn that woman without making it about your guilt. Every time you say, I'm terrible, I'm a monster, you are asking him to comfort you. That's backwards. Right now, you are the caregiver to the trauma you caused. We spent the next hour mapping out the logistics. This is the part that never makes the air because it's boring, unsexy, and absolutely critical. We talked about forensic accounting. I connected them with a specialist who tracks crypto scams. The reality is grim. Most of that money is in a wallet in Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia, and it's never coming back. But the act of looking, the act of turning over every digital stone is part of Sarah's penance. It shows effort. We established the transparency protocol. Sarah handed over her phone to Mark right there in the room. He took it, his hands heavy. I don't want to be her warden, Mark said, looking at the device with distaste. I don't want to be the guy checking her text. You aren't her warden, I corrected. You are her auditor. Businesses have auditors, not because they expect theft, but to ensure integrity. For the next 6 months, you audit. If she goes to the grocery store, she brings a receipt. If she withdraws cash, there's a reason. This isn't forever. It's until the data points of trustworthy behavior outnumber the data points of deception. They left my office with a plan. It wasn't a happy ending. It was a survival kit. 6 months later, I followed up. We don't always do this, but this case stuck with me. The sheer volume of the loss and the banality of the cause, loneliness and fear haunted me. I wanted to know if the outcome we pushed for actually held water. I got Mark on a video call. He looked different. Older maybe, but less frantic. The redness in his face was gone. He was sitting in what looked like a smaller apartment. Dr. Phil? He nodded. Mark, I said, give it to me straight. Where are we? We're still married, he said, and the surprise in his own voice was evident. But it's different. We sold the house. The big house? Yeah. Had to, he said. A shadow crossing his face. Couldn't keep up with the payments and the debt Sarah racked up. We downsized to a 2-bedroom condo. It's tight, but the debt is manageable now. Sarah is working 2 jobs. She's doing bookkeeping for a local mechanic, supervised, obviously, and she's working retail on weekends. How is she handling the work? She's tired, Mark said, but she doesn't complain. That's the thing. Before, she used to complain about everything. Now, she just puts her head down and works. She's paying me back. It's not much, maybe $500 a month, but she writes me a check. Restitution, she calls it. And the trust? I ask. Mark sighed, looking away from the camera. It's a ghost limb. Sometimes I reach for it and it's not there. Last week, she was late coming home from the store. My heart started racing. I thought, she's doing it again. She's meeting someone. I was ready to pack my bags. She walked in. 10 minutes later, there was traffic. She showed me the timestamp on her receipt without me asking. It helped, but the fear is always there in the background. That's PTSD, Mark, I told him. Financial trauma is real trauma. You were blindsided. Your brain is wired now to expect the tiger to jump out of the bushes. It takes time to rewire that. I know, he said. We're in counseling. It's brutal. We spend an hour a week just tearing open old wounds. But I think we're more honest now than we were for the 20 years before. We don't talk about the weather anymore. We talk about how we feel. It's exhausting, but it's real. I asked to speak to Sarah. She came into the frame. She looked stripped down, no makeup, hair tied back, wearing a uniform from the retail job. She looked tired, yes, but she also looked solid. The translucent, terrified ghost from the green room was gone. Dr. Phil, she said. Sarah, I said, you look like you've been working. I have, she said. I'm tired, Dr. Phil, but I sleep better. I don't wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if the police are coming. The secret is out. The worst thing happened. And I'm still here. And the blackmailer? Gone, she said. Once the story aired, once it was public, he had nothing. He sent one last threat, and Mark told him to go to hell. We haven't heard from him since. You were right. The sunlight killed it. And the shame? It's there, she admitted. I see it in my daughter's eyes sometimes. She knows we moved because of me. She knows her college fund is smaller because of me. That hurts more than anything, but I told her the truth. I told her Mommy made bad choices because she was scared and weak. Don't be like Mommy, be brave, I think. I think that's the only lesson I can teach her now. That's a valuable lesson, I said. Maybe the most valuable one. We hung up. I sat in my office for a while just thinking about them. They were the perfect example of phase 6. Outcome, the hard reality. They didn't get a miracle. The money didn't magically reappear. They lost their dream house. Their lifestyle was downgraded. They were working harder at 50 than they did at 30, but they had reclaimed reality. They were living in the truth. And in a world full of filters and facades, there is a quiet, rugged dignity in that. Mark and Sarah weren't happy in the traditional sense, but they were authentic. They were forging a new marriage in the fire of their failure. And I'll take a forged, scarred, authentic marriage over a shiny, hollow one any day of the week. Because at the end of the day, that's what this show is about. It's not about the shock value of the $185,000. It's about the human capacity to destroy and the even more stubborn human capacity to rebuild. We break things, we break promises, we break bank accounts, we break hearts, but if we are willing to pick up the pieces, sharp edges and all, we can usually glue something back together. It won't look like the vase that was on the shelf. It will have cracks. It will be uneven, but it will hold water. And sometimes that has to be enough. I reflected on the journey Mark and Sarah had undertaken. It wasn't the clean, cinematic redemption arc that people want to see. Audiences love a villain who turns into a hero overnight or a victim who gets a winning lottery ticket. But life doesn't hand out lottery tickets to fix character flaws. Life hands you a shovel and tells you to start digging yourself out of the hole you made. Sarah was digging. Mark was supervising the dig. It wasn't romantic, but it was functional. The final piece of this puzzle wasn't just about their marriage, though. It was about the precedent they were setting for everyone watching. When we aired the update on their story, the Where Are They Now segment, the response was mixed. Some people were furious with Mark. Leave her, they screamed in the comments. She's a parasite. Others were furious with the system that allows scammers to prey on lonely people, but a quiet minority wrote in saying, I'm in debt and I haven't told my husband. Watching Sarah made me tell him. Or, I've been sending money to someone online. I stopped today. That is the ripple effect of truth. Sarah's humiliation became someone else's wake-up call. Her confession, as painful as it was, served as a prophylactic for other disasters waiting to happen. I remember thinking about the concept of sunk cost fallacy in their relationship. Mark could have walked away. He would have been justified. He would have kept his pension, his remaining dignity, and started over. But he chose to reinvest in a failing asset because he saw value in the history. He saw value in the 20 years that came before the 3 bad ones. That is a sophisticated, difficult choice. It requires a level of emotional maturity that most people don't possess. It requires you to hold 2 opposing truths in your head at the same time. She betrayed me, and she is the love of my life. Most people can't do that. They need the villain to be all bad. They need the hero to be all good. But Mark was willing to live in the gray, and Sarah was willing to live in the red financially and emotionally until she could work her way back to black. I closed the file on my desk. The title, "My Wife Stole Our Life Savings," seemed almost too small for the story now. It should have been titled, "How We Survived the Truth," because the money was just the symptom. The disease was silence, and the cure was painful, invasive, radical honesty. As I walked out of the studio that evening, I thought about the thousands of secrets currently walking around in the bodies of regular people. The gambling debts, the hidden affairs, the addictions, the lies about paternity, they are all ticking time bombs. Mark and Sarah's bomb had gone off. They were covered in ash and soot, coughing in the smoke, but they were standing up. They were holding hands, however loosely. And in my book, that counts as a win. A messy, ugly, expensive win, but a win nonetheless.